I think that we're about to have a full circle moment, and Sony phones like the Xperia 1 Mark 8 that I've got in my hand are about to become cool again. Hear me out. I think all of us have heard of the term AI slop, and if you haven't, it refers to just AI everywhere, badly done. Artists like Tyler are using Blackberries for photographs so they can get that lo-fi old school effect. You're seeing people with wired headphones, digital cameras, MP3 players, breaking phones down into their constituent parts so that they can simplify life a little bit more. It's almost ironic because Sony is obviously the OG when it comes to digital cameras, Cybershock, portable audio, Walkman. But with the Xperia line, they've been really stubborn, arguably belligerently keeping things in here that have been dated for a very long time, like the headphone jack, like external storage, like a physical camera button, front firing speakers. But in 2026, could we be having an Xperia renaissance? Before I even attempt to answer that question, a couple of things. First, if you're not already subscribed to Tech Edit, please do. It's where tech gets a more inclusive edit. And also, if you're enjoying this video so far, click that like button. Next, a quick word from our sponsor to talk about something very Xperia. If you haven't forked out around £1,850 for a gold 1TB Xperia 1 Mark 8, then there's a very good chance you're settling for 250GB after you install Genshin Impact, Wuthering Waves, Honkai Star Rail. That's 150GB down. Add your WhatsApp backups to the mix and your favorite applications, and you've got a maxed out £1,500 smartphone. So if storage is becoming an issue, you may want to think about offloading stuff, and if not, onto an SD card. A very good place is a NAS. I've been using Google Drive for years, integrated it with my Tech Edit workflow, but I kept coming up with issues with the Google Drive app for Mac, editing files, having sync issues, etc. And that's when I tried out the UGREEN DXP 2800 GT NAS. Initially, I thought it would just be somewhere to store footage, but then my brother and I geeked out over it, and we realized we could integrate it into our whole Tech Edit workflow, make Google Drive pretty much redundant, and create a setup that was much more reliable. Between the two SATA drive bays and the two M2 slots, you can have up to 80TB of storage, which is nuts for such a small device. Yes, it can replace cloud storage, but it also works fantastically as a hybrid storage system. So when you need that super fast plugged-in access to edit video files, for example, it's perfect. 10GB Ethernet ports means when you're plugged in, it's basically like having your native storage, and so it can free up a lot of space from your device. UGOS Pro is also super intuitive and easy to use, allowing multiple devices to securely connect. And there are loads of clever ways to curate your media library. We even use password protection for sensitive files when sharing with clients so they can preview sponsored videos like this one. Additionally, the App Center gives you access to loads of really useful apps, allowing you to set up your NAS exactly how you want it. And specifically with the Xperia 1 Mark 8, I've been going around getting sample footage, uploading it straight to the drive into the folder that I'm going to be editing from, which just misses out a lot of unnecessary steps. In short, it's been a really great companion as I've reviewed this phone over the last few months. Back to the Xperia Renaissance, and I'm going to start by talking about cameras, because in order to get this video prepped, I did a whole bunch of comparisons across the iPhone 17 Pro, the Google Pixel 10 Pro, and the Galaxy S26 Ultra, just so I could really understand how each of these cameras work differently, and that whole nostalgia factor that Xperias kind of have. While the big three, Apple, Samsung, and Google, work so hard to correct the imperfections created by low light, artificial lighting, etc., Sony lets imperfections creep through, and therefore arguably represents real life a little bit better, which is kind of what a lot of us are craving right now. Now, during the daytime, all four cameras are super competitive, but it's at night that Sony's more true to life kind of leaning comes through. For example, when you zoom right in, it cleans up detail less. Yes, it's less sharp, but It also looks like a photograph, not something that was rendered in Adobe Illustrator or something. Now, as for this selfie, first impression, the Xperia made me look so freaking yellow, but guess what? I was under a yellow light. So once again, even from the front, while I think the Xperia camera is technically the worst selfie camera in a lot of respects, actually, when it comes to what it produces, it's arguably the most realistic in a lot of scenarios. As you can see from these portrait shots during the day, the phones perform very, very comparably in a lot of ways, but Sony is just that little bit more old-fashioned. Going beyond the processing, this extends to the hardware. The Xperia 1 Mark 8 is the only one with a physical camera button. It is two-stage, it's nice and spongy, it's easy to press, and it's very, very intuitive and feels retro, nostalgic. And again, that really ties into what a lot of people are looking for today. Another reason the Xperia 1 Mark 8 is so competitive with Apple, Samsung, and Google is because the camera hardware doesn't fall behind the competition. It's got big sensors, and the zoom camera is also very versatile, more so than the big three, able to focus closer, so you have macro capture across all the cameras, making it more versatile than all of them. And so you can, when paired with that more pared back processing, capture a really elegant looking close-up shot, especially with that 3x zoom. That makes it so good for portraits, but also product photography, food and stuff. Really gorgeous incidental camera phone with a really nice photographic finish. There's a full Xperia versus Apple, Samsung, Google camera comparison that will dive into all these pictures, so subscribe for that. But now let's move on to the multimedia experience, and that really does carry forward that Sony nostalgic ethos. You've got front-firing speakers, you've got an SD card so you can store your media offline. Who needs to stream videos when you have enough room to put hundreds of movies on here? You've also obviously got that 3.5mm headphone jack, and a lot of people today believe wired audio is the only audio you should be listening to. But there's an entire new generation that think it's just way more stylish to be plugged into your phone rather than wirelessly connected. Something a lot of people may not realize, Xperia doesn't have a selfie camera in the display, so you have a completely uninterrupted view of whatever you're watching on your phone, making it arguably the best phone for watching content on for movie video purists who don't want any interruption. Also, because the speakers are facing you, sound is pumped directly at you, not sideways, and the Xperia sounds very good. So while a lot of AI is geared towards amplifying the content experience, from watching to listening to creating, the Xperia 1 Mark 8 is leaning much more on hardware than software. And again, that's just very now. I think what's most important about this phone for me is it doesn't drop the ball when it comes to day-to-day performance. The 5000 milliamp battery lasts a full day, and there's a Snapdragon 8 Elite Gen 5. That's the same as found in the Galaxy S26 Ultra, albeit gaming performance isn't quite as good, but it's not far behind, and it's much better than the Google Pixel 10 Pro with its Tensor chipset, which is terrible for gaming. Then there's the iPhone. Obviously, that's going to perform very well, but the fact it's really holding its own, plus you've got 256 gigabytes of storage, that SD expansion, or you can opt for the 1 TB version I've got, and it runs Android. 4 years of OS updates. It isn't as future-proofed, but it's solid. It's a modern day smartphone experience. So if you're wondering whether I think Sony is being prophetic or has just been really stubborn, I don't think Sony's having its brat moment necessarily. I don't think Sony realized when it was creating this phone that it's arguably making the most culturally relevant smartphone of 2026 that can tap into a lot of the desires people have right now. A big reason I genuinely think that is because Sony entirely positions itself as tech forward. The AI assistant within the camera is terrible in my opinion, but it's a really good example of the fact Sony's still trying to do something with AI, but luckily that's the only place you'll really find it. Everywhere else within the phone could have represented that kind of counterculture mentality that you don't have on other phone makers. You have no AI kind of like transcription features, nothing like Samsung's Now nudge or whatever it is that's trying to prompt your day along with AI nudges. Sony's got a clean interface that's very simple, that arguably feels dated, but could be what a lot of people want nowadays. And I do think we've got to give some credit to Sony, whether it's stubbornness or being committed to its own values and its fans as well. The Xperia 1 Mark 8 throughout the generations has held on to features that smartphone manufacturers en masse let go of years ago. It just so happens that those values and features are really having a moment. And I'm really curious to see whether the world picks up on the fact that what it's trying to do right now, Sony has kind of been doing all along. What's also ironic is Xperias are available in fewer countries, I believe, this year than ever before, making the Xperia 1 Mark 8 even more exclusive, which is another thing that is very, very desirable today. Let's get back to the question. Are Sony Xperia phones finally cool again in 2026? I know. I'm a 41-year-old man. But one thing I do know is Sony's holding on to tactile experiences, wired headphones, less processing is all very aligned with what I'm seeing people much cooler than me reaching for these days. It's also really neat from a camera geek point of view that the Samsung Galaxy S26 Ultra, Google Pixel 10 Pro, Apple iPhone 17 Pro, none of them like lord over Sony's camera hardware. Sony really holds onto its own and betters the competition from a hardware point of view, making the processing feel more intentional and less like a compromise. It's a very different conversation when you look at phones from Vivo, Honor, Oppo, Xiaomi, because those brands are literally bathing in AI. It's almost inception-y. They're using AI to create the lo-fi, under-processed look that Sony's create, just with a lack of processing. But they're doing so with vastly superior camera hardware, and they're going for a very different audience to the Xperia 1 Mark 8, one that doesn't maybe value minimalism quite so much and analog experiences. So if, like me, you are a little bit fatigued with all automation, all of the artificial intelligence in our phones right now, you do miss some of those more analog experiences. The Xperia 1 Mark 8 definitely is not a perfect phone, but there's an argument, I think more so than any other year, that it is a tonic to the phones and the general tech landscape right now. That's what I'm starting to think the more I've used this. Long-term review is going to be on the channel soon. If you've got any questions about it, please do let me know. And I'm also curious to know your take. Do you think Sony is having its brat moment? There is an Xperia renaissance, or do you think it's out for the count? Let me know with a comment. As ever, if you enjoyed this video, please subscribe to the channel. It helps me out like crazy. Like this video and check out our socials on Instagram and TikTok. Have a wonderful day.